recognize Deanna because a couple years ago, she came and spoke at a number of our Shorewood schools with two other books that she made, A Boy of Color and A Girl of Color. Have any of you heard of those books? Okay, some of our friends here have. Wonderful. Well, I am thrilled to introduce you to Deanna. A little bit about her. Deanna is actually from Milwaukee, so she is from our community. She is a mom. She is a sister. She is a Girl Scout, and she's an author. She also serves as a business consultant and speaker and a podcaster who's recognized nationally for her work in leadership, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Deanna earned her undergraduate degree in urban studies from Fordham University. She is a lawyer and earned her law degree at Georgetown University and an MBA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And she has earned a certification in diversity, equity, and inclusion from Cornell University. Please welcome, with a big applause, Deanna Singh.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, I want to just give everybody in this room a big shout out because it's kind of drizzling outside and it was a beautiful day. We're in Wisconsin. We don't have that many left. And so the fact that you're here makes my heart so happy. So can you give yourselves a round of applause? Yay. Well, I am just really excited to be able to be here with you because there's a number of things that happen when somebody writes a book. So one of the things that's kind of funny is that when I go and I get to talk to people, and I talk to a lot of people. So in the last 3 months, I've talked to over 200,000 people, a lot of people. Right? And one of the things that happens is people will do an introduction like Miss Sadna just did, and they'll say, you know, we'd like to introduce you to the author. And I'm always like, oh, there's an author here? Where's the author? And then they point to me and I'm like, oh, that's right, that's me. And the reason why that's the case is because honestly, I'll tell you lots of secrets tonight, but one of my big secrets is I never thought that I would be an author. I never thought that I would write a book, let alone, I think I'm at 7 books now. So one of the things that I like to tell people is that everybody and anybody can be an author because everybody has a story to tell. And that is what I learned. So the way that I actually became an author, can I tell you this story? So the way that I became an author is one day I was in a room that was like this, and there was a lot of adults, and we were doing what adults like to do. We were having conversations about children, but there were no children in the room. And I remember getting up. I'm kind of a loud speaker, you know, so I remember getting up and saying, I really think that we should be talking about our children in a different kind of way. And I thought, you know, that what I said made a lot of sense, but because I was a little frustrated, and I was a little frustrated because there was a lot of people like talking like, oh, you know, the kids this. Blah. Have you ever seen that cartoon, the Peanuts? It was like, nah, rah, 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 right? Like it was a lot of like, rah, 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 rah. I'm thinking, why are they talking about our kids like this? So I got up and I said, you know, I really think that we should be thinking about what our kids can do and all the wonderful things that they are and just the wonderful ways that they're. But because I was a little bit angry, you know, and a little bit frustrated, I sounded more like this. And kids, wonderful children, right? But lucky for me, somebody else in the room stood up, and this was a person who was way on the other side of the room. And this person stood up and she said, you know what? I'd like to reiterate. That means I'd like to, you know, say again what Deanna said. It's important for us to talk positively about our children and to talk about all the cool things that they can do. And so I thought, oh, thank goodness this other person, you could actually understand her, right? She wasn't as frustrated as I was. And when she sat down, I thought, okay, this is going to change the whole conversation. But guess what? Somebody else got up and it was, you know, the kids these days. You ever hear me saying that? You called me on it, okay? But, and I thought, this is it. And I imagined myself throwing the table and pushing my chair, but I'm not a violent person. So instead, I reached in my purse and I grabbed a pen and I started to write. And I started to write and write and write. And again, I was in a room like this. And what happened is the lights went off on me. Everybody in the room left, and I didn't even realize it. You know what I was writing? What? I didn't know I was writing a book, but it turned out I was actually writing a letter to my kids. So I have two children. They are 10 and 14 years old now. And I was writing a letter to them. And my letter, I was saying, you know what? There is a public relations problem out here as it relates to children. And by public relations, I mean the way that we talk about our kids. There's something going on here. And I just want you to know that if anything were ever to happen, or if you were ever to go out in the world, there are some things I want you to know about yourself. I want you to know that you are smart and that you are creative, right? I want you to know that there are people who really adore you. So I was just writing this letter. And I remember I got home. This is a true story. I got home and it was right around Valentine's Day. And I thought, I could be really clever here. I could take this letter that I wrote to my kids and I could add some pictures to it. And I could make like a little PDF PowerPoint thing. Then I could give it to my kids as like a little Valentine's Day card. And in my mind, and I don't know, none of the other parents do this, okay, but I do this. In my mind, I could just imagine my children being like, oh, mommy, this is so amazing. My kids don't talk like that. Right? But in my mind, I thought, oh, this is going to be so cool. And I'm not super technologically like savvy. So it took me a while to get the pictures and the words and everything in one spot. And so I went to sleep thinking, yeah, this is going to be awesome. Right? I'm going to give them this PowerPoint. But then as I was laying there, I was thinking to myself, that's not how my kids are going to respond. My kids are going to be like, oh, mom, you tell us this all the time. Right? You're always saying these things to us. And I thought, I need some reinforcement. Right? I need somebody else who can also say these things. And I thought, who could I go to? Where can I go? What's a tool that I could use that would make my kids understand how powerful they are? And right away, I thought, books. Right? Don't we go to books to get stories, to see ourselves, to get encouraged and inspired? And I was like, I'm going to go find some books with kids that look like my kids, and I'm going to buy as many as I can or go to the library. I love the library. Shout out to the library. But I was like, I'm going to go to the library. I'm going to get all the books that have little boys in it, that are little brown boys that look like my kids, right? That say positive things about kids that are little brown kids, little brown boys. And I thought, I'm going to get all of them. And I was going through all the places we go through, Google, Amazon, all the dark corners of the interwide web, trying to find books. And I couldn't find any. It was really hard to find books that had little boys who looked like my little boys. And I thought, well, geez, where am I going to go to for reinforcements now? So now it's like 3:00 in the morning. And I'm thinking, well, I wrote this little letter. It kind of looks like a book now. And I wrote it for my kids, but it's really about all the kids I've had the opportunity to work with. What would happen if I turned it into a book? And you know what the first thing I did was? Who's this? You know the first thing I did? Who knows the first thing? Who can guess? I didn't. You know why? Because the first thing I did was Google, how do you write a book? I had no idea. And it was 3:00 in the morning. And you know what I said to my husband was laying next to me? I said, hey, I got an idea. And he's like, what time is it? I got a great idea. I'm going to write a book. And he's like, do you know how? No. Are you going to figure it out? Yes. Can I go back to sleep? I guess. Right? So the first thing that I did was I Googled how to write a book. And then I read a lot of different things and I learned a lot of stuff. And I actually ended up writing, I Am a Boy of Color. So this was the very first book that I wrote. And I have to tell you, I made a million mistakes. So many. Do you want to hear a funny one? Yeah. One of the funny ones was that I was like, wait, if I'm going to write a book like this, you have to have good illustration. Friends, I cannot draw. Okay. If you were to ask me to make a stick figure, I probably would fail. That's not my skill set, right? So I'm like, the first thing I need to do is I need to find an illustrator. And so I remember I found somebody who is an illustrator, and I really liked his work. I had been looking for a long time trying to find somebody. And I called him and I said, hey, and his name is Mr. Amar Nosora. And I called him and I said, Amar, I would love for you to illustrate this book. He's like, well, I've never done a book before. I said, good news, me neither. And then he said, well, I don't understand, I don't think I can have the time to do it and everything. And he said, so I'm really sorry. It sounds like a great project, but I can't do it. And I said, oh, okay. But then I thought about how my kids would go about this. And I was like, they have taught me well. So then I had my publicist call, and she called and she said, it'd be really nice. She has a much more serious voice. It'd be really nice if you could do the artwork for Deanna's book. She doesn't sound like that, but in my head, she does, right? So he had a lovely conversation with her and he said no. So I thought, okay, I have one more try, right? I'm going to give it one more good try. Don't you ever have that when your parents say no and you're like, let me just give it one more try. Anybody do that? Oh, okay, good. And you admit it too. So, that's awesome. Maybe, right? So I decided I was going to give it one more try. So I actually saw that Mr. Amar was going to be at an art gallery, and he was going to be doing portraits. So people were invited to come and see him do his portraits. And so I remember I said to my kids, hey, I have someplace I want to go. They're like, where? I'm like, don't worry about it. I just need you to come with me. Right? We get into the car, we drive to the art gallery, we get to the door, and I say to my children, who are much younger at the time, I say, look, you and I both know that when I say this, you're going to know exactly what I mean. So I just need you to do it. No questions asked. I said, I need you to take all your cuteness and turn it up to the highest level. And they did. And so we went and stood in back of Mr. Amar as he was painting. And I leaned over. He's very quiet. I leaned over. I'm like, hi, how are you doing? And he said, hi, how are you doing? I said, good. You might not know who I am. Oh, I know who you are. Right? I said, well, my children and I just wanted to see if maybe you'd rethought doing the book. I think at this moment he realized I was pretty persistent. So then he decided to do the book, and look how beautiful. Isn't it gorgeous? Yeah, so we had to learn a lot of things together. One of the big things that we learned was that Mr. Amar would make these beautiful portraits, and he bikes everywhere. So he doesn't have a car. He likes to bike everywhere. And so he would say, like, meet me on the corner of such and such. And we would meet on the corner, and he would unravel this art piece. And sometimes they were this big and sometimes they were this big. Turns out you have to have your pictures all the same size. So we had a lot of things that we had to do in order to edit the book down into an appropriate size. But I could go on and on and on about the mistakes we made. And there were many, many times where I wanted to give up. I'm going to tell you one more time I wanted to give up, okay? One more time. So there is 14 sentences in total in this book. Miss Sedna went through all the places that I've had the privilege of being able to go to school. I have been in school for a long, wonderful time. I have written many, many, many papers. This book is only 14 sentences long. So I remember when I wrote the first edition of it, I sent it to an editor. Who knows what an editor is? Yes. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, sometimes you do get rejected by an editor. Yes. So what happens with an editor is that you send your material, they read it, and then they give you comments back. So I'm thinking to myself, 14 sentences, this is pretty good. I'm going to send it to my editor. And I imagined, I have a very fun imagination, right? But I imagined that the email that I was going to get back from my editor would sound like this. So I remember I sent it. I got an email back. I opened it up and I thought, this is what it's going to sound like. Before it even came, I already knew. It was going to be like, oh, Deanna, this is marvelous, darling. Oh, my goodness. The writing here is exceptional. I have no comments for you. If you want to capitalize this one thing, go ahead. But otherwise, darling, exceptional. You know what I got back instead? What? Can you guess? A bunch of rejections. It was a red line on every single word. And I remember looking at my husband, who's an English professor, and saying to my husband, oh my gosh, I don't know. I think this is too much. I don't think I can do it. And he looked at me and he goes, get it together. This is part of the writing process. I remember thinking, okay, fine. How many times do you think I had to send it back to the editor? Somebody guess. Yes, back here. Yes. 20? 13? Yes. Oh, geez, 14 sentences. Okay, I had to send it back, I would say probably about 22 times. Back and forth. Because there was lots of questions about what are the words you're using? What's the age group? How much do we want to stretch? Does this really match the picture still? Are you still getting the right, flow? This sentence has 6 words in it. This one has 5. Choose. Lots and lots and lots of questions. So by the last time this one was over with, I was like, send me one more email. Just kidding. I was like, oh, I love you, editor. No, I wasn't. I was more like, send me one more. I dare you. But I'm so glad because now when I look at the book, I know how much hard work really went into making it possible. Okay. Any questions for me specifically about being a writer? And then we'll talk about American Girl. Yes. Very good question. So every book that I have written, it's been a totally different time frame. When I wrote I'm a Boy of Color, I thought that I was the slowest person in the world. It turns out I was moving very quickly, but didn't realize it. So I want to say that book, we got it in the summer, like June. So I want to say it took maybe about 6 months from the first day I Googled to when I actually got the book. I just wrote a book for Penguin Random House that came out in May 31st of this last year. That book, I started the writing process and got the deal and everything about 2 years ago. The American Girl book, typically an American Girl book takes 2 years to write. So 2 years from when they decide they're going to write the book to when they finished. And we finished it in 9 months. It's one of the fastest ones that they've ever put out because they had made a commitment and they really wanted to do it. So it's all different. It all depends. And if you ask me for real, how long have I been writing a book? A lot of times the ideas are things that take 10 years, 12 years. So sometimes when people say, how long have you been writing this book? I say, my whole life. You're kidding me? These are ideas that I've had to sit with and grow with and learn with. So it can take a really long time. I'll take one more question. Yeah. Yep. So one of the things that really happens, right? Thank you for that observation. One of the things that happens is because I'm not an artist, I get to write the book first. And then what we do is we find an artist who will then illustrate the book, right? So we have to find an illustrator. And one of the coolest things about working with an illustrator is that they have to take what you are saying and turn it into something that's really visually going to demonstrate or represent what you're trying to get off the page. So I have to tell you, this circle of girls, that was probably like 5 to 6 hours of conversation amongst probably about 20 people to come up with a really good representation of what it was going to look like for us to have the different characters in the book. That's cool, right? But it's somebody else's creativity and like being able to see them take it onto the paper. Okay, so a couple of things. There's a lot of things I want to kind of share with you, but I really wanted to talk about the book writing experience because I think that's important. But what I also want to talk about is just this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Those are a lot of big words, but that is what I get to do every day. Every day I am working with people on how to make their workplaces or their schools or their communities more inclusive, which means like, how do we make sure everybody gets a chance to come in and feel like they can thrive, like feel like they can do really well? So what I want to do is I want to talk to you just about what it means when I talk about diversity. And hopefully this will make sense. So whenever I talk about diversity, I like to talk about it as like building a bridge. So my background is that my mom is African American and my dad is actually Sikh American. So he is from Punjab, India, and my mom is from Mississippi. Her family's from Mississippi. So मैं पूरी पंजाबी बोल सकदा, which means I can speak Punjabi fluently. And for Thanksgiving, I normally have collard greens, saag, and mac and cheese. I have a very, very interesting family background. My mom is from the West. My dad is from the East. And so I spent a lot of my time as a child actually learning how these different cultures, right, could come together. And I always talk about it like a bridge. Okay. So this is what I mean when I'm thinking about a bridge. When I think about a bridge, the first thing that I'm thinking about for diversity is I'm thinking that we're making these bridges to one another. And the idea is that everybody is welcome. So when I say the word diversity, what I really mean is everybody is welcome, right? Doesn't matter what your background is, where you live, where you come from, where you've been, what languages you speak, everybody's welcome. The second word that we use a lot is this word equity, which is a big, big word. But when I'm talking about equity, what that means is like, have you ever had somebody and you're playing and maybe they're new in your classroom or new in the neighborhood, and you say to them, you know what, not only is everybody welcome, but you go over and you're like, come play with me, right? Come use my bridge. So basically, when we talk about equity, what we're really talking, it's a big word that just means, you know what? We want to make sure that everybody can actually use this bridge. Okay, so diversity is anybody can come, but equity is that people are actually invited. They're like, yeah, you know what? Come on in. This idea of inclusion, it's my favorite. I love this word, right? But the idea of inclusion, when we're thinking about building a bridge, is, you know what? I'm not just going to say, hey, do you want to come play with me? I'm not just going to say, you know what, you can play in my playground or in my backyard or at my school or whatever I'm playing on the playground. Not just say that, but I'm also going to say, you want me to show you how to play this game? Right? Do you want me to? Because I think it would be really cool for us to do this together. Okay, so that's what we mean when we talk about inclusion, is that we're also saying to people, you know what? Let me show you around. And then the last word that we talk a lot about in my work is belonging. And that's this idea that we should build bridges together. So sometimes we're playing, right? And we see somebody we don't know, and we say to them, hey, everybody can come and play. But then we make it even better because we say, everybody can come and play. But you know what? We would love for you to play with us. Like, come play with our toys. Come play on our area where we are actually playing. But that you make it even better. And you're like, let me show you the rules of this game. It's going to be so cool. But the best thing is when you're like, you know any games? Could you teach me some of the games that you know? You want to make a game up together? Does that make sense? So to me, that's what I get to do every day. I get to do it with a lot of grown-ups mostly. It's more fun with kids, right? So we talk about this a lot. What does it mean to build a bridge? What does it mean on the playground? And I want you all to think about what that means for you. So I'm going to do this really quick because I know I've been talking for a lot and I want to make sure that we have some time to sign books. I'm good till 7:30, right? No, I'm not going to keep you all that long, but just a couple of things I want to share with you. So a lot of people ask me, well, how did you write, this book, the Girl's Guide to Race and Inclusion? So I want to share with you just a really interesting story. And I know we have Girl Scouts here, but I know everybody in here is here because you're interested in your community, right? That's a thing that kind of brings all of us together. We all have a responsibility for our community. Well, a number of things happened, especially in 2020, and people started calling me and they were emailing me and they were texting me and they were asking me this question. They're like, Deanna, there's a lot of things happening in the world right now. And my kids are asking a lot of questions and I'm not exactly sure how to answer some of the questions that they had. And so my husband and I were talking about that, and I was writing all these long letters and doing all this other stuff. But I thought, you know what? One of the things that I know always helps me is trying to think about how I can serve other people, right? What does it look like to show up and serve other people, especially sometimes when things are hard? Sometimes when things are hard, you want to like just crawl up in a ball and kind of go in a corner. But I always find that when I do that, I still feel sad. But when I go out and I try and do something good for somebody else or work with somebody else, I actually feel better. So there was this time that people were asking me these questions. And so we decided that we were going to do a session. And the session was like online. It was free. Anybody could join. And we were talking to families about how to talk to their kids about race. And we set it up on a Saturday night. And then by Monday night, we had over 100 people come to that session. And in fact, there were so many people who came, we couldn't even let everybody in because there was like not enough room in the Zoom room that we had, right? We had hit capacity. So I said, okay, we'll do it again next week. So we did it again the next week. Again, Zoom capacity. In 3 months, we talked to 10,000 people. 10,000 people. And it was incredibly inspiring because there were so many people who had this question who were coming together to try and answer it together. And it was cool to be able to facilitate those conversations. Well, here's the thing about service. When you are doing things for others, you don't always know how that's going to turn out, right? Like what's going to happen, what else? It's like creating a ripple. Have you ever thrown a pebble into the water? And then what happens? Ripples, right? And it gets bigger and bigger. My husband and I were on a lake last week and you couldn't see anybody. There was nobody out. And we threw one little stone in and we saw it go all the way to the other shore, the ripple, right? It's powerful. And so anyways, I did this and, 10,000 people later, all these wonderful conversations, so inspiring. Well, it just so happened that one of the head editors at American Girl was on one of those calls. And she was on the call because she was trying to answer that question too, but not just for her family, but also for American Girl, right? What could American Girl do? And so what was interesting is that they called and they said, Deanna, we are really interested in writing this book and we were wondering if you'd like to be the author. And I said in my most business-like voice, oh yes, I'll have to see. But in my head, I was like, are you kidding me? Oh my goodness, this is so exciting. But in my head, I said, yes, yeah, we'll have to see. I think that sounds like a great idea. So I ended up writing the American Girl book. And like I told you, instead of it taking 2 years, it actually took us about 9 months to get the book out. And so that meant that everything had to happen really, really, really quickly. So there was a lot of late nights, me and that book. One of the funniest things they said to me through the whole time was they said, we want you to write like you're a cool auntie. And I remember saying, yeah, I don't know if I can get that voice right. My nieces and nephews will probably say, that's not the right one, but I tried. So when you read it, you have to tell me if I sound even remotely like a cool auntie. But it was fun, right? It was fun to write the book. And we also had, I think, about 500 girls read the book. So in that time, not only did I have to get written, not only did we have all these experts who came alongside me, a wonderful illustrator, but we also made sure that there was a lot of girls' voices in the actual production of the work. And when we decided that we were going to do it, I mean, do you know how many people it takes to put these books out? It's a lot of people, right? My name gets to be put on it as author, but there's a lot of people that participate in the process. And then because we had so much fun doing that process, they came back to me again and they said, hey, we've got these products coming out, super secret, but would you have any interest in helping us with our next 3 dolls? And I was like, how did I do my voice? Anybody want to try it? You want to try it? What did I do? How did I say it?
Maybe we can work something out.
Yeah, but what was I doing in the inside? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That was really good. We could go on the road together. So these 3 dolls, I actually had the opportunity to help design, which was such a cool experience. So if anybody has questions about that, I'm happy to share them afterwards. And we had so much fun doing this for New York Fashion Week. That's when they introduced the dolls. And they actually took everything out of the store, like one part of the store, put a runway in. And then I got to go walk on a red carpet and everything and get to see the release of the dolls. So it was just a magical, magical experience from start to finish, being able to be part of that. My primary job was to read the books that came with each of the dolls and just look at them and kind of ask questions of the authors and sort of help them along the way. I also got to, though, look at hair and eyes and give comments back on the accessories and all the other cool things that come with these dolls. So that's the journey. And what I want to do is, I know I've talked a lot. I'm sorry. It's just because I really get excited about this. But what I want to do is I want to actually give you a chance to do some writing. So in front of you, you should have a worksheet. If you don't, we can make sure that you get one. But one of the things that I always try and encourage people to do is kind of to think about, what are some of the things that right now in your life, what are some of the things that are the places and spaces that you are spending a lot of your time? In the book, what we talk about is we talk about this idea as bubbles. Okay. What are your bubbles? And so a lot of times when we think about bubbles, we're thinking about our family, we're thinking about friends, we're thinking about schools, maybe activities that we do like book club. And I just want you to think about who are the people who are in your bubble. So I'm just going to give you a few minutes on that worksheet to kind of write in some names. Everybody know what we're doing? Okay. All right. So just a few minutes to do that. If you need a pen, let us know. You do? Okay. Oh, no. Okay. We'll grab you some more. back on. I'm just as loud without it. But the reason why I like to have people do this is because sometimes we forget that the things that are our experiences are not necessarily the experiences of everybody else around us, right? That our experiences can be very different based on where we live or what our family is or where we go to school. And so in the book, one of the things that I did was I tried to show how two children who are going to school might have totally different experiences when they go to school, right? Even though they're going to the same school. And so in the book, the two children that we kind of talk about is a child named Madison and a child named Selah. And this is on page 18 and 19, if you wanted to look in your books. But you can see Madison, she's in the library. I like libraries, so I try to pull them in wherever I can. But she's in the library, and she is wearing her hair in a ponytail. And like most of her friends are wearing their hair in ponytails, so nobody says anything to her about it. But when you look at Selah's situation, Selah has hair that's different than a lot of the children that she goes to school with. And so a lot of times people are trying to touch Selah's hair or see how it feels or ask a lot of things about it, right? So same school, same library, same situation, but totally different experiences. Another thing that we see here is that when Madison walks around the library, Madison can find a lot of books with pictures of people who look like her. But when Selah walks around, it's really hard for her to find books in the library that have pictures that look like her. Remember what I told you, the story about how I wrote I'm a Boy of Color? Yeah, it was really tough to find other books that had pictures that looked like my children. And so then she talks about, Selah is talking about, in her history class, she's focusing on a lot of other white people and their experiences. But Selah doesn't actually get the opportunity to see other people who look like her and what their history is and what their experiences are. So when I was doing the American Girl book and we've put it out, one of the things that happened, this is kind of one of those like famous moments, right? So one of the things that happened is there was a camera crew that came to my house. They came to my house, they put these big screens over all of my windows and turned my house into a studio. It's the same team that does all the B-roll for Oprah, is what I was told, okay? So it was cool. They had all these like cameras on rollers, and it was like I had to stand on this platform, and I got to do all these things. But and I had to answer questions. And one of the questions that they asked me was, what was the first time when you were a kid that you had a book with somebody who looked like you? And I actually still have the book. I should have brought it with me tonight. But I still have the book. When I was in middle school, or maybe it might have been my last year of elementary school, but I still remember the librarian. I went to the library and I checked out a book called Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. Okay, a little book with a little brown girl in it. I got this book, and when I opened it and saw that there was a girl that looked like me, I was so excited. I went home, I read the book, I slept with the book. I came back to the library, I checked it out again. I went home, I read the book, I slept with the book. I came back, I checked it out again. This book looks like a hot mess. And I remember about the 14th time I came to check out the book, the librarian said, you know what, Deanna, why don't you keep it? And I still have it. I still have it. It's one of my most prized possessions, but it wasn't until I was like a teenager that I saw a book that had somebody that featured a story like that looked like me. And so you think about how powerful that is, right? Like how much it meant to me as a child. And so to be able to do this for other people. So what we try and talk about is that it's important to know who's in our bubbles, but it's also important to think about who's not in our bubbles, or what might the experience that we're going through, how might it feel for people who are a little bit different than us, right? Another example that I like to use a lot, if you walk into a building and you come in and you take the stairs and you come into the space and you don't even ever think about, well, where's the elevator? Somebody who is in a wheelchair, they don't get to have that opportunity. It's very different for them, right? They have to come in and find the elevator. There are things that we get to do based off of our own bubbles, our own experiences, that don't make us think sometimes of what other people might be experiencing. So I like to think about that, right? So I want you to think about that too. What are some things that might be happening for other people who are still part of your community, but how might they be experiencing things a little differently? And these are some examples, right? If there was no books or shows or movies with characters who look like you, you didn't have any school lessons about people who look like you, or if you went to school with a dress code that told you the way you wear your hair is inappropriate. So a lot of the people in my family wear turbans, right? When they wanted to play sports, it's always an issue. Can they wear the turban? Is that considered a headdress? Is that appropriate? But that was a really important part of our faith, right? So that makes it a little bit different experience for people who are going through different things. So we're going to wrap it up pretty quickly here, but I actually want to leave you with some challenges. So these are in the book, and there's lots of different exercises and things that you can do. So I'd love to hear what you all end up doing with the books and your families. But this is one of my favorite things to do. I like to really talk about the easy ways that we have in order to make our bubbles bigger and to make our bubbles so big that we bust them and make bridges instead. Okay. And these are some of the ways to do it. They're pretty simple. They're actually fun. So one of them is finding videos that help you learn about experiences from other people's point of view. In our house on Friday nights, we do a Friday night sleepover. It is so fun. We bring a huge mattress out into the living room. We push all the sofas to the side. We argue for hours about who's going to watch the movie or what movie we're going to watch. But one of the things that we have put into the rotation is, hey, let's watch something that's about an experience that we don't know anything about. And it has been so fun. We've watched cartoons in different languages from different places in the world. So what are some ways that you might be able to think about things you're already doing? Another one is to look at books of authors of color whose main characters live in bubbles that are different than yours. So how do you look at different books? When was the last time you read a book with a character in it that was different than you? Right? And really thinking about how you can do that. And I know for a fact that the library has a wonderful collection, especially here, of books that you can choose from. So if you're kind of like, I don't know, I need some help, you can ask somebody here to actually give you that guidance. Another one is to find recipes of food you've never made before, or to watch a show or a movie featuring a different group. One thing that we like to do, I don't know about you all, but I love a good dance party, especially a dance party for nothing, right? So we like to host dance parties in our home. And one of the things that we will do is we will pick different kinds of music and just have a little dance party, like a little mini dance party. Researching other community events. We have so many cool things that happen in this area. So just thinking like how you all came here tonight, thinking about what are some of the other cool things we might be able to go to. Learning another language, even if it's just some basic words. And one of my favorite things, like sometimes if we're just bored, if it's like we were planning to go outside and play and it's a rainy day and we don't have anything to do and we just spin a globe and we're like, let's go visit a museum virtually in whatever place we just went to, or let's take Google Maps and see what they're, or let's find out what sports do they play in this country and maybe watch a little bit of a game and see if we can figure it out, right? So how do you take just something as simple as that and turn it into an adventure? Doesn't all that sound fun? Yeah, so this doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be hard. It's actually stuff that we already do. It's just doing it with a little bit different mindset. So my challenge to you all this evening is to think of something that you think that you could do to make your bubble bigger, to build a bridge. One thing I will tell the Girl Scouts is that there is a special thing that just happened last month. The Girl Scouts of Nassau County reached out to me and asked me if we could make a Bubbles to Bridges badge. So there's actually a badge that goes with the content that we have created here, and we'll make sure you get the links and how you access that. But what's really cool is that, remember when I showed you that service thing before? The first time I got on my computer and said, like, I'm just going to do something to try and help other people. I didn't know we'd have books and badges and all these other things. But when you start building bridges, what happens is other people get encouraged to build bridges too. Okay? So that's what we're looking for all of you to do. I'm so excited that you were here tonight. I know that we are at time, but I want to make sure if there's any last questions that I can answer them. And I also want to say that I'm going to be in the back. I'm going to sign books. And when you come back, you get extra points if you can come up with at least one thing to make your bubble bigger, or even better, that would allow you to make a bridge. Sound good? Okay. All right. Awesome. Let's say, can we do 2 questions? Okay. 2 questions. Yes. Ooh, when I was a kid, had I ever experienced racism? Yes, actually. So one of the things that I talk about, for the parents, if you ever get a minute, I did a TED talk on my first day of kindergarten. And just like what that experience was like for me. I was super excited to go to school, and I got on the bus and there was a little boy in back of me who said something really, really mean. And it was the first time that I realized that I was actually a girl of color. Before then, I had been surrounded by my family and, like just these situations that had never really, maybe I did know, but it didn't really hit me right until I was in this moment. And he said something that was so mean. And I remember that it was hard to hear that, but it also was one of those things that now I look back on it. And when I am writing books for kids, or like when I get to choose what the kids look like in the books and the pictures and stuff, I try to pay a lot of attention to that because I don't want other kids to experience the things that I did. So did I experience it as a kid? Yep. Did I experience it last week as an adult? Yeah. But do I believe that we can do better? Absolutely. Great question. Yes. Ooh, so was I trying to fight back or leave it alone? Have you seen me up here? What do you think? I was fighting back. Can I tell you one thing I got to do when I was younger is when I was in high school, I actually decided that I would start a group called the Culture Club. I had no idea that there was music also named this, just FYI for parents in here, okay? But I started a group called the Culture Club, and what we did is the first year we hosted people, and we had it after school, and I went around to the local restaurants, and I used the same thing my kids did to get Mr. Amar to draw this book. I went to the restaurants. I was like, could we please have a little bit of food for this event? And all these different cultural restaurants. And so they gave us food, and it was awesome. And then we had people from different cultures come in and dance and do demonstrations. And as children, we set up these booths. Well, it was so popular, right? So I did this my freshman year, and I was only in high school for 3 years. So my freshman year, I did this. Then my sophomore year, the principal was like, you know what, that was so cool and so popular. We are going to shut the school down, and we want everybody in the school to go through it. So then we got to host it in the middle of the day. And then we got to do it again in my senior year, my third year of school, because I did high school in 3 years. And then my husband did it the year after. So he was still in school. So he did it the year after. And I think they did it for some years later. Well, they stopped doing it. And then just a couple of years ago, we're in that same district. I went back to the school, and they had this amazing fest. And I found the superintendent, and I was like, just so you know. But I did it right when I was like 12 years old, 13 years old. So yeah, I really thought that it wasn't so much about fighting. That's not the way that I think about it. I really think about it as like, how do we build these bridges, right? Like, how do we create opportunities to get to know each other better? So I wouldn't necessarily describe it as fighting, but maybe. Okay. Yes. Last question. Have I ever drawn any dragons? No. But I do want you to know that she did show me her dragons. If you want to see an amazing dragon, she's got it. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you all.